honored, truly honored to be here today to introduce my friend and neighbor, Ann Finnie. My name is Michelle Lascano. I live here in Scituate with my 2 young sons. I have been in the field of broadcasting for 25 years, mainly as a writer and a television producer. And then 3 years ago, they decided to put me on camera, so I thought that would be a perfect time to get over my fear of public speaking. We'll see. Something I have in common, I have something in common with Ann's book. It's my birthday today, too. But I think Ann was in labor a lot longer than mine. About 7 years, Ann, is that right? Of soul searching and putting your heart and soul into this book to deliver it to all of us. And hopefully I was a labor of love for my mom as well. A little bit about how I came to know Ann. Can you all hear me? Also? Yeah. I grew up in Scituate, over on Delta Lane. My maiden name is Brennan. And I'm the oldest of 4 children. And family was everything in my life and still is. Over the past 15 years, I have experienced the loss of 4 of my immediate family members. My younger brother, David, passed away in a car accident. And his identical twin, my other younger brother, Stephen, took his life. My dad passed away from melanoma, and my mom, most recently, of sudden cardiac arrest. And it's been challenging, to say the least. It's been very difficult. There's been a lot of ups and downs. On a particularly tough day, a number of years ago, I was having a really hard time, and I thought to myself, I need to talk to someone. And I knew I had driven by and signed for Footprints Holistic. And I thought somebody really special must live in that house. So I didn't even feel like going out, so I Googled to get the phone number, and I called Ann. And Ann and I became fast friends. Ann is such a special person. When I walked into Footprints Holistic, it was like walking in and getting a warm hug. And it's been like that anytime I needed Ann. She's so supportive, and not only is she supportive to you, she'll send you a follow-up letter of support. My mom, before she passed, was very fortunate to be able to have Reiki with Ann. And after she passed away, I went and was getting her mail in the mailbox, and there it was, the letter from Ann. So Ann, I'm sure, have people known Ann for like over 20 years, anyone? Wow. So you know more about her than I do, probably. But Ann is an inspirational writer. She spent time as a psychotherapist, a substance abuse counselor, a holistic practitioner, an educator, a mother, and a doting grandmother, and my friend. And I am so happy to be here and honored to spend my birthday this way. Thank you for asking. And without further ado, oh, sorry, one more thing. With each loss, I felt more and more alone. And with all of those losses, Ann was writing this book, You Are Never Alone. And she asked me to read it at the exact time in my life that I needed it. And I hope that you find as much comfort in reading this book as I did. It really saved my life in many ways. So I'm shaking. Ann, over to you.
Welcome. Michelle, thanks so much. Not fair. Make me cry right in the beginning. Thank you for kicking off book launch this morning. It's just a joy this afternoon. It's just a joy to have you with us. I've so appreciated our connection over these years, and you told it. So thank you so much for that. I also want to thank the Scituate Library staff and everyone for helping us to get ready for this day. Jesse, the director, and Susan Pope, Ann Zona, and all who helped to make this possible. And to Susan Davis, who's in the room somewhere, who's been wonderful with all the promotional stuff for today and for talking me off the ledge several times in the last 6 months. Shannon Perry, who's here, who did the book cover for the book, which I just love. And I'm sure you'll agree it's wonderful when you see it. And to all of you who are here to celebrate with me today, with all of us. Thank you so much for being here. It just means so much to me to have you all here. Some of you I have known for many years. I'm not going to say how many. Many years. Some of you that are here have known me since I was born, so that's quite a while. And some are newer friends, but I thank you all for being here. So, most of all, I also want to thank the inspiration for this book, which is My Higher Power. That's too much God talk, but that's God. So it's my higher power that I choose to call God. You can choose to call it whatever you want it to be. I'll say more about that in a moment. But first I want to tell you a little bit about what the book is about. You Are Not Alone is a memoir, self-help perhaps, a memoir of struggle, faith, and resilience. It's a book about finding the strength to get through the challenges that we all encounter in life, such as illness, poor self-esteem, depression, anxiety, divorce, loss, whatever it might be, and rebuilding who you are as a person after life as you know it takes a radical turn. And I think we've all experienced that in one way or another, or sometimes more than one way. I hope that you will, at the very least, find hope and be willing to open to the possibility that love, help, and support are around us in every moment. Sometimes through friends and family, and even strangers, sometimes from sources we don't see. And when you can be willing to believe and open up to those powers around you, to that possibility, to the help and guidance that's with us, that support becomes even more available to us. Like I said in the close of my Mariner columns that some of you have read, what have you got to lose? So I hope you'll try out that possibility. So a little bit about how this book came to be written. For years I thought about writing, and I always thought, I'll write when I retire. Several years ago I started getting nudges from my higher power. I tend to refer to my higher power as God, Spirit, whatever. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you call it. And I would argue with that spirit, as I often do, and say, yeah, when I retire. I'll write when I retire. I'll write when I retire. Yeah, the nudges kept coming. I said, yeah, I'll write when I retire. And about 7 years ago, I figured out I'll probably never retire. So I just start writing. So I did, and when I started writing, I just did a series of writings and ended up, long story short, starting to write for the Mariner then, and that was about 7 years ago. I just submitted those pieces to a new editor that coincidentally, synchronistically, after I had written them, about 2 weeks later, there was a note in the Scituate Mariner that they had a new editor for the Scituate edition, and she was looking for some fresh blood for the paper. So I sent them to her, and a couple of months later started writing a bi-weekly column for the Mariner. That same year, I started writing accounts of how I got through some of the difficult times in my life, and getting them down on paper, not really knowing exactly what I was going to do with them. But what I was actually doing was some writing therapy. And as Michelle mentioned, one of my backgrounds, I have a varied background, but I was a psychotherapist and a substance abuse counselor for quite a few years. And what I was doing was writing therapy and healing the deeper layers of my own hurts and hang-ups. And that nudge kept coming to me and saying, you need to share this stuff with other people so that they know that they're not the only ones who goes through this stuff, and that they can get through it, the hurts, the fears, the sadness, the insecurity. So I just kept writing about a lot of the stuff that I'd gone through, my own hurts, habits, hang-ups, and eventually a book came into form. And now it's been edited and molded and shaped like my life has been. In the book, I share about how I survived and healed from experience I thought I never would. And not only have I survived them, but thrive. And I hope that in reading this book, you'll find the hope that you can do that too, that you can heal the things that right now you may be holding on to that you think you can't ever heal, and that you are never alone in that process. Again, whether it be people in your life or spirit or whatever it might be, there is help around you. Like Michelle, when she said one day she just picked up the phone and called because she had been driving by my sign all the time. If you're open to it, you'll be led to a way that can help you to get through some of the difficult things. So now I want to just share with you one story from the book. There are stories that are kind of tough. There are stories that are funny. And this will just give you a little bit of a flavor for what one of them is. So bear with me because I'm going to kind of read. I'll confess I'm not reading from the book because I need it to be really big print. But before I start that story, I just need to give you a little bit of context for those of you who don't know me. Some background. In college, I completed degrees in education and business administration and worked in accounting for several years. Later, I went to grad school and studied to be a psychotherapist. Years later, after a divorce and my two children were getting into junior high and high school, I left a traditional 9-to-5 job and learned then, that's when I began practicing energy work, which Michelle referred to, which I've been doing for about 15 years now. Many of you here today may remember my mother, Emily, and my father, Bob. They owned Bishop's store over in the Sandhills in the 70s and 80s. And my cousin Deb worked there, and I just saw her come in, so I know she's here somewhere. There's Deb. Deb was like a sister to me growing up. My dad was a police officer in town, and in retirement was Bob Finnie the locksmith. And some of you probably have had Bob Finnie the locksmith unlock your cars or your homes or whatever when you got locked out. We're townies, those of you who don't know it. And back in 2005, after my mother passed away, I moved back to the home where I grew up to be close to and help my dad in his declining years. So in the time frame just before this passage I'm going to read, my father had passed away, my parents had both passed on, my children were launched, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the next chapter in my life. Because I've been kind of taking care of kids, family, parents, all my life. I didn't really quite know what else to do. So I entered into a discernment process in my church. And this process is where a team of a dozen people or so, chosen by me, with leaders who are trained in the process, helped me to determine a direction to take at this point in my life. And some of those people are here today that were part of that discernment team, and I appreciate that so much. You're being here and you're being with me at that time. As part of the process, I shared with that team a chronicling of my jobs, my interests, my abilities as I saw them. And they, in turn, shared with me their observations of the gifts and talents that they thought I had and might be used towards living my purpose in the world going forward. So that's the backdrop. I'm going to refer to that process, which is why I had to say a little bit about it. So I considered several suggestions that came out of that discernment process, one of which was to become a hospital chaplain or hospice chaplain. And when I met with the head of chaplaincy at South Shore Hospital, I learned more about what hospital chaplains do, and it was clear to me that I wanted to develop deeper, longer-lasting relationships than with people who are in a typical hospital or hospice situation, so that wasn't going to be a good choice for me. For the second time in my midlife, I seriously considered going to seminary, but it was clear in my 50s that I didn't want to be a parish minister, and I didn't want to take on that kind of debt or time commitment at that stage in my life. So another suggestion had been to grow my healing practice and leave the part-time office job that I was working in at the time. But it was really scary to think about working independently and not having a steady paycheck or health insurance or any of that stuff. So I was contemplating how to grow my practice. And I pursued one of the other suggestions that came out of that process was to get my counseling license back again, which I had let go many years before, being kind of fed up with the way insurance runs the industry and how treatments run, and I won't get on that soapbox here. But I had found that in my holistic energy work, the process of talking with people as I worked with them and doing the energy work helped to release the emotions and to heal the body, mind, and spirit even better than just doing energy work or just talking. The synergy of those two things together was more effective. So I decided to look into again what it would require for me to go back and get my counseling license again. And it was going to require 250 continuing education units and to pass the National Counselor's Exam again, which I had passed 25 years earlier. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual number 3, we're now on number 5. But I gathered all the materials and decided I was going to go for it. So I put in a lot of time studying. It is a little bit harder when you're older. And I soon remembered why I'd left the profession when I did years ago, primarily because insurance companies were dictating treatment, but also because of the enormous emphasis put on diagnosis. I'd never liked the idea of pigeonholing people with a diagnosis. I much prefer to treat a whole person rather than a condition or an illness, focusing holistically on the whole person. But it seemed to me that being able to offer professional counseling again would help me to expand my practice and serve more people. So after months of study, I scheduled to take the counselor exam in Framingham, Mass. Some of you know where that is. I arrived in the area with more than an hour to spare. People who work with me today know I like to get things done ahead of time, and I get really anxious when things aren't ready on time. So I arrived with more than an hour to spare, so I did what I always do. I found a coffee shop. Anybody who knows me knows I usually have a cup of coffee in my hand. So according to my printed MapQuest directions, I didn't have GPS back then, I was about 10 minutes from the test center. So I left the coffee shop allowing more than 30 minutes to drive a few miles to the test center, and I couldn't find the street that MapQuest was telling me I was supposed to turn onto. So I stopped at the Sheraton Hotel and asked for directions, which I got from the concierge, who was the only person available to give me directions, who told me in such broken English that I couldn't understand what he was talking about. So I went back in the direction that I had come from, and I saw someone going into an office building, so I jumped out of my car and ran over to ask directions, and he said, I don't live around here either, I don't have any idea. Okay, so there was a church not far over that way with 3 cars parked outside, so I said, all right, I'll go over there. I knocked on 3 different doors, they were all locked, not a prayer for me there. So I was beginning to panic. Diagnosis code 300.0, general panic disorder. If I didn't arrive by 9:15 a.m., I wouldn't be admitted to take the test. I turned onto the only street that seemed like it might be headed in the right direction. Suddenly, I saw a fire engine followed by a captain's car coming towards me. I come from a firefighting family, if people don't know that about me. So I knew that the trucks didn't have their emergency lights on, so they were probably returning to the station. So I pulled into a side street, jumped out of my car, and flagged down the captain. He put on his flashing red lights, pulled in behind me on the side street, and I ran over to him and thanked him for stopping and informed him this is not an emergency, well, not a fire emergency anyway. And I told him I'm looking for 795 Water Street, and he began to explain how to get there, but then he said, well, in this traffic, it was around 9 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be kind of tough to get there. It was 9:04. I'm not sure how I mustered the nerve, but I blurted out, will you lead me there? Because I know firefighters know where all the streets are. So he chuckled, and then I quickly added, I have to take an exam, and if I'm not there by 9:15, I won't be able to take the test. Will you please lead me there? And so he said, okay, follow me. And I hopped in my car and followed him back in the direction from which he'd come, without red lights, thank God. So I nervously watched the clock on my car radio as I followed him. It was 9:08. When we fell in line behind a line of school buses, I panicked again. Stopped in traffic and approaching an intersection where he had his blinker on to go right, I could see that around the corner there was more traffic stopped over there. I was sweating bullets, kind of like I am right now. It was 9:11. As we turned the corner again, I'm sure the captain could see as we stopped in the traffic around the corner that when he looked in the rearview mirror that I was panic-stricken. He pointed left at a strip mall that was over that side of the road. We're headed this way, and he's pointing over there, and I'm leaning out the window and I hollered to him, that can't be it. That's an H&R Block and a dry cleaner. So he wheeled his car over into the parking lot next to the H&R Block and said, this is 795 Water Street. And I guess he knew because right next door was the fire station. Anyway, I jumped out of my car, thanked him over my shoulder, locked the car as I ran towards the test center, and burst through the doors of H&R Block. As the woman behind the desk, the proctor, said, are you Ann? And I panted, "Yes, you just made it." So I tried to catch my breath as she led me to the testing room and gave me the instructions. I logged into the computer because everything's done by computer now. I had my picture taken to assure the computer that I was me, and I took the short practice test to acclimate to the program. And then the computer froze. So the proctor left the room, and I took her absence as a gift of time to kind of do some deep breathing and calm myself, settle my jangled nerves. And when she returned, the computer still didn't work. So she did something on the keyboard that brought the screen back to the beginning in the sign-in process, and I started again. And the second photo ID was a little less frazzled. So I began the test. The questions and the case studies on this test were very different from the ones I practiced online, and I got really anxious. 2 hours later, as I checked out of the exam center, the proctor asked me how I thought I'd done. And I told her honestly, I have no idea. Unlike 25 years earlier, when I'd taken the handwritten exam and waited 6 weeks to get the results, today's test was scored by the computer, and it was going to spit the results out right on the screen right there. So she printed the report and was scanning it, and the test was graded in 2 distinct sections. So she looked at the first part and it said, "Oh, you passed that with 17 points to spare." In the second section, it said I was 4 points lower than the passing score. So she was trying to add them together and figure that I passed. So she said, "Do you know where it says somewhere here that you passed?" And I'm looking over the thing and I can't find it anywhere until finally in the upper right-hand corner, my eyes fall on examination results fail. My heart sank. I'd invested a lot of time and energy in preparing for this test. I was discouraged and embarrassed. I trudged to my car after gathering myself emotionally. I called my daughter. I called my best friend Barbara, who was supposed to be here today but broke her arm in Florida last week, so she's not here. And fought back tears as I told them both that I failed the exam. I was also frustrated because I was going to have to wait at least 90 days before I could take it again. And I didn't want that hanging over me. So on the 2-hour ride home, after getting lost again, because I really didn't know how I had gotten to this, I asked God and my highest self, what is it that I'm meant to learn from this experience? I thought I was being called to regain my counseling license so I could counsel with clients I do energy work with. Was I wrong? Did I misunderstand? Was I listening to my ego? Was the fact that I failed the test again an indication that I was on the wrong path? Or was it a sign I needed to persevere? What was I meant to learn from this failure? I didn't know. So on the drive home, I had the thought that maybe I needed to realize more humility. When I talked to my daughter that evening, she quickly reminded me what I'd said to her when she missed passing one of her ultrasound boards. "It's not a big deal, Mom. You'll retake the test and pass it. You have to practice what you preach. Keep going, take it again. You'll do fine." Yes, I had to practice what I preached to my clients and my kids. I had to pick myself up, dust myself off, and keep going. That evening, I found myself glued to Dateline with Tom Brokaw and interviews with survivors and families of those personally touched by the 9/11 attacks 10 years earlier. That certainly put my disappointment into stark perspective. I got the reality check that I needed in that moment. Mine was a temporary setback. I did sign up to retake the exam after 90 days. Since I was going to a different test site this time, and I still didn't have a GPS, I went the night before and stayed overnight at a hotel so that I could get a good night's rest, ensuring me that I'd get to the test site in time without having to fight the traffic or the March winter weather, or find a fire department escort. So I arrived at the test center in plenty of time this time. Now familiar with the test site computer, I was comfortable. I studied the differential diagnosis criteria extensively because that was the section that I blew. I just missed passing it the first time. So I completed the test and waited for the computer to spit out my scores. This time I knew where to look, in the upper right-hand corner. And in the upper right-hand corner, I saw exam results, fail. Again. Why am I telling you about my failures? Because this is the kind of stuff that we need to learn to get through, right? I couldn't believe it. I prepared so well. I was completely at ease taking the test. And I really thought I had done well. Once again, I'd passed the first section with points to spare, and again, I'd failed the diagnosis section by 1 point. So as I drove home again, feeling defeated, I kept asking myself and God, why is this happening? I practiced for many years before letting my license lapse, and I thought I'd never work in counseling again, and my weakness was just in pinpointing the differential diagnosis. And if you don't know what that is, it means between what's going on psychologically and medically and the different psychological things that are going on with a client or patient. So I headed home, frustrated and annoyed at how much time and energy I put into this endeavor, and now with nothing to show for it. And then my cousin Pam called, who was also here. She called me that night to see how I'd done. She was reassuring and told me how stressful it had been when she took her nursing exams, and how often nurses didn't pass on the first or even the second attempt. She sympathized with me, but then she brought me up short, saying, well, maybe you just needed to fail at something. What do you mean? I asked her. Well, have you ever failed at anything? I laughed. Are you kidding? I failed at lots of things, primarily my marriage, okay? Have you ever failed at anything academic or professional? She persisted. I thought about it. I'd always been a good student. I'd gotten good grades, and no, I hadn't really failed exams or tests before. Maybe I did need to experience failure and the feelings that accompany failing, so that I could better relate to the people I worked with who'd suffered these kinds of embarrassment and shame that often come with this kind of a defeat. I thought after failing the first time that perhaps I needed to find humility. Maybe I needed to find empathy around failing too. Until now, I didn't know what it felt like to fail in these areas, and it didn't feel good. It pushed me into shame, self-doubt, and unworthiness, emotions that often clients come in needing to heal. So at that time, I'd been working with a business coach and who knew that I was seeking this relicensing. She'd been encouraging, though not sure it was really vital to expanding my practice. We just happened to be scheduled to meet the next morning, and when I told her about my defeat, she didn't seem surprised or concerned about it at all. She asked me, do you think it's possible that you're just not meant to be a licensed psychologist again? What do you mean? I asked. Well, I understood the literal words. I didn't understand what she was getting at. Is it possible you're not passing this test either because your soul doesn't want you to return to that kind of work? That it's not part of your call to be doing that kind of counseling again? Well, maybe, I conceded, still a bit puzzled as to her point. Why did you decide to pursue relicensing, she asked. So I can offer counseling services in combination with energy work, I answered her like a brat. So you want to be able to promote yourself as a counselor and accept insurance, she pressed. Yes, I think that would enable me to expand my services and serve more people. And do you want to work again with people who have challenging mental or emotional diagnoses, she asked. I thought about it for a minute and I thought, well, I prefer to work with people, with clients who have already done some therapy and are in a place of stable mental health, but are looking for more spiritual, emotional wellness that seems to elude them. And do you really want the hassles of dealing with health insurance again? Not really, I confirmed. So do you think you need that license? She pressed. I chuckled and admitted, I guess I don't. I was grateful that I chuckled instead of beating myself up for having wasted so much time, money, and emotional energy over the last year pursuing a license I didn't really need or want. In the days that followed, I became more and more settled with the idea that I'd gone off on a tangent yet again. I do that a lot. And that my higher power had redirected me back to the path that was for my highest good. My prayer for guidance had been answered, just not the way I thought it would be. I was not alone. I was being guided. And I just needed to trust. So this is one story from the book. There are many. I hope that when you read the book that you will relate to some of them. You won't relate to all of them, but there's so many different types of stories in there and ways that I was able to get through them, not very gracefully at times, but to just, I hope that you will find the hope that you will have the help that you need, especially when you're open to it. And this one story from the book illustrates a challenge, my challenge to figure out what to do with the rest of my life, the process of trying to overcome that challenge, which for me was entering the discernment process and trying to do something that would move me towards the goal I thought, and then resolution of the challenge. Now, it might seem that I did not find a resolution to the challenge because I kept failing, but in fact I did. I learned a lot about what I did not want. Not to deal with insurance companies, not to deal with extremely challenged individuals still. I learned that I did not need to be a licensed psychologist again to do the work that I was doing with people in energy work and coaching. So I found in this example and several that I share in the book that help was available to me in the form of colleagues, friends, family, and spiritual guidance when I was willing to listen to that guidance and for that guidance. And by doing so, I found work and life that I enjoy almost all the time, and it's a blessing. I hope that reading this book will bring you hope and encouragement, and that the knowledge that on life's journey, you are never alone either. Thank you. A little bit of question and answer time.
And if you have, I think maybe we should stand, because
Okay.
I think if we sit.
Okay.
And if you have any questions for Anne, feel free to ask them. I just have a couple myself for her. Your motto for Footprints Holistic, healing your soul one step at a time. For anybody out here who doesn't even know how to take that first step, where do they begin?
Just being willing to ask for help, whether it's from a friend or a family member, or like Michelle did, picking up the phone. If you've been passing some, whether it's some kind of a therapist's office or some kind of a holistic practitioner's office, and it keeps calling to you, like you find yourself looking at that sign every time you drive by, you might want to just call them. Pray about it. I don't want to go all religious on anybody, but ask for guidance. The guidance is out there for us. You don't have to do any fancy thing about it. You don't have to sit in the lotus position with your legs tangled in a knot and contemplate your neighbor for 20 minutes and then ask for help. Just talk to the universe, talk to God like you would talk to your best friend, and ask for some guidance. And then here's the tough part. Listen. Okay? After we ask, we have to also listen. And then listen. Sometimes that, for people, it's writing. For me, writing has always been part of it. I've journaled for 40 years. Burned a lot of journals in 40 years too. But you'll get the wisdom that you need, you'll get the guidance that you need when you ask for it and then you listen. Or bounce it off a friend.
And I have a strong faith. That's what has helped me through some of the tough times in my life. But every once in a while I still say, what was God thinking? Have you ever had a point in your life where you said that and really took a step away for a short amount of time? Have you always had such a strong faith?
I would say that I didn't have a strong faith until I started to get into it in my late 20s, early 30s, and I had gone to a Christian college, didn't get it there. Good college and all that, but I didn't really get it there. But it was really after getting knocked down several times that I began to develop a closeness. And for me, it really came on when I got into 12-step recovery in my late 20s. And it's in 12-step programs, the concept of higher power can be pretty loose, so that pretty much anybody can relate to it. I mean, there's one place in the AA Big Book where it says your higher power can be a doorknob. I kind of don't go along with that too much, but basically believe in something other than yourself. And it was once I got into the programs that I started to really develop my faith. Now, back to your question, were there times later in some of the tough times? I have to say, once I finally got it, I pretty much have stayed connected with God. There are times when I was further away and times when I was closer, for sure. But I can't say that I always knew, and that's why this book came through me, I think, and it came through me, it didn't come from me, was that I always knew I was never alone, even when I was mad at God, even when I thought, God had turned his back on me, her back on me, however you look at it. And I learned that, when higher power seems far away, who moved? It's usually me. So, and I use the analogy all the time. You just got to plug back in. I look at the outlet on the wall. I say this to clients all the time. You know, the cord falls out sometimes. Pick up the electrical cord and plug it back into higher power. And use that visual of plugging into a light socket. God, one of the sayings I love the most, and this is in the book, from the big books of Alcoholics Anonymous, is, God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. Yeah, the language is all male in the AA big book because it was written by men. But God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him, her, it. Just ask. Just ask.
So you do a lot of Reiki also. My mom really enjoyed her Reiki session with you, and I did as well. But have you ever had anyone, I'm not sure if everyone in the room knows what Reiki is, but have you ever had anyone say, I thought I was getting a massage or anything like that? I thought you were going to touch me? And can you explain Reiki for those of us in the room who don't know it?
Well, I could do a whole course on that, but I won't. But Reiki is a form of energy work, and it's basically the practitioner has been trained and connects with the energy of the universe, which I believe is spiritual. Not all Reiki practitioners do. And there is actually hands-on touching in the way most people do it, but it's very light touching, all appropriate touching, and it's just helping the energy to move through the practitioner and through the person to help unblock any blockages that might be in the person's energy system. The example I always give is, we're all familiar with how the circulatory system works in the body with blood, right? And if we get a blood clot or a blockage in the blood system of the body, not good. If it goes to the heart, the brain, the lungs, whatever, not good. The same thing can happen in our energy system in our body. They can get blocked, they can get constricted, and then the energy doesn't flow through the body to heal the body the way it's naturally designed to do. So by doing various kinds of energy work, and there are all kinds, Reiki is just one kind, we can help to open up those blockages. It's kind of like energetic roto-rooter. And when the body has the energy flow, just like when it has the good blood flow, it will naturally restore itself. Sometimes it needs a little bit of encouragement. That's a real loose definition, but...
Does anyone else have any questions at all for Anne? Oh, we have one?
Yeah, well, I'm just curious what your thoughts are for folks that aren't religious, that it's just sort of, religion has just sort of escaped me. So I don't really have a higher power that I turn to.
Well, you've come up with the one question that I have trouble with when I work with clients. And I'm just going to be honest about it. Oh, she said, what about people that don't have any connection to a higher power or belief in a higher power? Okay? And I'm just going to be honest, because that's what I do. This is the one question I have trouble with in working with people, is that when I'm working with somebody who really just cannot feel any kind of that kind of connection, I get to a point where I don't know where else to guide them, because that is where I end up guiding people when all the other things that I would try working with people don't work. So I'm just going to be honest and tell you, I don't know how to answer that question, because that is what sustains me, is having that connection. No matter how loose it might be at sometimes, no matter how small it was when I started, it depends a lot on how you define your higher powers. For some people, it's just nature. I don't mean just nature, but it's nature. For some people, it can be whatever you want it to be, but something outside of yourself that you look at as being greater than yourself in terms of an energy that you can connect with. And that's all I can say. I'm not going to make it up.
Anyone else?
You've helped me in what you just said.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
Do you have a favorite part of the book?
I do, and I'm not going to say too much about it, but I'll just tell you it's the very end of the book. I don't want to give it away, so it's like the last couple of chapters, and it's because it ties together everything that I've been talking throughout the book about believing, in some kind of help that's available to us and trusting. And it's about a medical situation that happened to somebody in my life that was very dire. And that just seems to pull it all together. And that's pretty vague, but I don't want to give away what that is. But that's one of my favorite things. Any of the places that make me laugh. And there are a few.
Yeah, there are. Yes.
Well, Ann and I know each other, obviously, but I went to the question about if somebody doesn't believe. I'm a nurse and have worked with patients that are dying and some that just don't have any faith in something. And my solution or my response to that question is I pray about it, or I go to God myself in hopes that some clue will come either to the person or to myself to bring you to a place that feels connected.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie, and I do that as well. But yeah, thank you for that, that's helpful.
Anyone else? Going once?
Okay. Eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say something very similar. I've had a faith my whole life, different religions and doorknobs and whatever. And then I met Ann, and she's helped me through lots of wonderful things and really hard things. And she always said, I just left feeling so, I don't know, light and bright. And I'm like, what did you do to me? And I guess one time she said, I had read, it's like God in skin. Like when you're with someone that has this energy that brings the light through you, it's almost like God through skin. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I went through some more hard things, and I went to prayer, and then I was reading Ann's book. I was one of the lucky ones that read it early, and I was like, all right, Ann, this is really every single story you pray, and then there's a happy ending. Like, come on, really? And I went, I'm sorry, but, and then I went through a really bad medical scare just recently. And I said, well, I don't know, what would Ann do? Like, what would Jesus do? What would Ann do? I don't know, God and skin, keep together. Right, I know, ridiculous. And a lot of times she'll say, oh, well, I might just be full of shit, but why don't you try? So I was in, I do, but she does say that. So I was in the hospital, and I didn't know what else to do. So, I'd done all the right things, and so I just prayed. I was like, really? I don't know. How can you fix a medical thing with prayer? Like, really? But Ann, I was reading her book, and I was like, well, I'll give it a try. And nothing really came about. It wasn't healed. And then one day, it was. And I literally, it was like, I don't know, something struck me. I fell to my knees, and I said, oh my God, this was a miracle. I couldn't even believe it. And so I did. I shared it. I'm like, Ann, you are right. You are never alone. I couldn't even believe that the combination. So thank you, Ann. She might be full of shit sometimes, but mostly not.
I have to say, though, what I always say, like when you say these things to me, it's not me. I'm a conduit. I'm a channel. I'm like a PVC pipe, okay? You know how the PVC pipe carries the water through your home? I'm a PVC pipe, and the energy comes through me, but it doesn't come from me. And that means that when I work with people, it doesn't take anything away from me. I'm not exhausted. People will say, oh, aren't you exhausted after you work with 3 or 4 people in a row? No, I'm energized. Because that energy is flowing through me, and it's charging me up. It's like I'm the battery, it's charging me up when I work on other people. So it's not coming through me, and I don't do miracles. The only miracle I do is say yes to letting the energy flow through me. So all the credit for any of that goes to higher power, spirit, nature, universe, whatever you want to call it. I'm just the PVC pipe.
All right, well, Ann is going to be over here signing books. The PVC pipe.